August 1944, the Allied breakout from Normandy shattered German defenses across France. General George Patton's Third Army charged eastward at a pace no military planner had deemed possible, advancing 30, 40, even 50 miles a day. But there was a problem no one had foreseen. The armies were outrunning their supply lines. Every Sherman tank guzzled 5 gallons of fuel per mile. Every infantry division required 650 tons of supplies daily. Ammunition, rations, medical gear, spare parts. The port of Cherbourg, still being repaired from German sabotage, could handle only a fraction of what was needed. The next major port, Antwerp, wouldn't be operational for months. That meant everything, every bullet, every bandage, every can of beans, had to be trucked over bombed-out roads from the Normandy beaches to the front lines. Some 350 miles away, the logistics officers at Supreme Headquarters were staring at inconsistent numbers. Patton's tanks were literally running on fumes. The Third Army had advanced so fast that supply trucks couldn't keep up. Within a week, forward units reported being down to just 3 days' worth of ammunition. Some tank battalions were completely immobilized, not by enemy fire, but by empty gas tanks. The room erupted when Colonel Frank Ross, Chief of Transportation, briefed General Eisenhower on August 21st. "We're losing 23% of supplies before they reach the front," Ross reported. Truck accidents, German air raids, vehicles breaking down in the middle of convoys. If Patton stopped, the Germans would reinforce. If he kept going without supplies, his army would crumble. Eisenhower stared at the map. The window to end the war by Christmas was closing. How long to fix this? Weeks, maybe months. We'd need to completely redesign the convoy system, establish proper maintenance depots. We don't have weeks. Eisenhower's finger traced the red line marking the German border. The Wehrmacht was retreating now. Give them time to regroup, and we'd be fighting through the Siegfried Line in winter. He looked around the room. "I need solutions in days, gentlemen, not months." The meeting adjourned with no answers. That same day, 90 miles from headquarters, Technical Sergeant Raymond Ray Kowalski sat in the cab of his GMC Jimmy truck, staring at the wreckage of another convoy. 8 trucks overturned, burned out, supplies scattered across the roadside. A Luftwaffe strafing run had caught them bunched together on a narrow road, like sitting ducks. Kowalski was 34 years old, a long-haul trucker from Pittsburgh before the war. No college degree, no military pedigree, just 15 years hauling steel shipments across Pennsylvania's mountain roads in all weather, all conditions. The Army drafted him in '43, gave him 2 weeks of driver training, and shipped him to France. Now he was watching good men die because nobody in command understood how trucks actually worked. He lit a cigarette and thought about something his dispatcher back in Pittsburgh used to say. "Convoys are for show. Profits are in the spacing, call to action. The Mr. 1230 mark. Before we continue, if you're fascinated by the untold innovations that changed history, hit that subscribe button. 75% of you watching aren't subscribed yet, and you're missing stories like this every week." The official convoy doctrine for the Red Ball Express, the code name for this emergency supply operation, was simple. Trucks traveled together in formations of 20 or more vehicles, 60 yards apart, maximum 25 mm. Safety in numbers. Kowalski had driven 6 convoys in the past 2 weeks. Every single one had taken casualties. The problem wasn't just the German air attacks, though those were deadly enough. The problem was what happened before the attack. 20 trucks bunched on a rural French road created a target visible from 10 miles away. When the lead vehicle spotted enemy aircraft, the entire convoy stopped. Nobody could maneuver. The trucks ahead were trapped by the trucks behind. The spacing that was supposed to provide safety instead created a perfect kill zone. But Kowalski noticed something else. On August 23rd, his convoy was delayed at a depot for 6 hours. Some trucks loaded faster than others. A few drivers, impatient with the wait, just left on their own when their cargo was secured. No coordination, no organization. Those independent drivers arrived at the forward supply dump safely. Every single one. The official convoy Kowalski eventually joined lost 3 trucks to a German Fu-190 attack. He started watching the pattern. Independent trucks traveling alone or in pairs, spread out over hours instead of bunched in 30-minute windows. They were nearly impossible for German aircraft to target effectively. Even if the Luftwaffe spotted one truck, it wasn't worth the fuel and ammunition to attack a single vehicle. But a convoy? That was a target worth diving on. The math was simple. A convoy of 20 trucks was one big target. 20 individual trucks spaced across 4 hours of travel time were 20 separate hunting missions. The Germans only had so many aircraft, so much fuel, so many pilots. Kowalski ran the numbers in a notebook. The convoys averaged 23% losses, accidents, attacks, breakdowns, but the handful of independent trucks he'd tracked, less than 3% losses. On August 25th, he took his notebook to his company commander, Captain Dennis Hayes. "Sir, I think I know how to cut our supply losses by 90%. Hayes looked at the truck driver standing in his tent, dusty coveralls and oil-stained hands, and said the words that would echo through military logistics for the next 80 years. "Kowalski, you're a goddamn truck driver. Leave the tactics to people who went to West Point." The official Army rejection came in writing. Captain Hayes forwarded Kowalski's proposal up the chain with a note. "Enlisted man suggests abandoning convoy doctrine. Recommend dismissal." The response from battalion headquarters was immediate. Convoy procedures are based on established military doctrine. Individual vehicle operations create communication gaps, eliminate mutual support, and violate tactical protocol. Proposal denied. Kowalski read the memo and laughed bitterly. Tactical protocol. He'd been driving trucks since these staff officers were in high school, and they were lecturing him about vehicle operations. But he didn't give up. On August 27th, he approached Lieutenant Colonel Martin Burgess, the Deputy Operations Officer for the Transportation Corps. Burgess actually listened for 10 minutes before shaking his head. "I understand your logic, but do you know what happens if I send trucks out individually and one breaks down? No escort, no support. The driver's stranded in hostile territory." Burgess tapped the map. "These roads are still crawling with bypassed German units. Convoy security isn't just about air attacks. Sir, with respect, we're losing a quarter of our supplies in convoys that are supposed to be safe. I'll take my chances alone. It's not just your chances. It's Army property. It's strategic material." Burgess's voice softened. "Look, I appreciate the initiative. I really do. But this isn't a peacetime trucking company. This is military operations. There are reasons we do things a certain way." The room erupted when Kowalski tried presenting his data at a driver's briefing on August 28th. Other sergeants shouted him down. "You trying to get us all killed separately instead of together?" One yelled, "At least in a convoy we've got support." Even the other drivers thought he was crazy. The unofficial word spread through the motor pools. Kowalski's got a death wish, wants to play cowboy on French roads while Luftwaffe fighters are hunting. His own squad stopped sitting with him at chow, but 3 people were paying attention. Private First Class James Booker, a driver from Detroit's automotive factories, approached Kowalski privately. "I've been watching the same thing you have. The independent runs are safer. Everyone knows it. They just won't admit it." 2 other drivers, Corporal Eddie Martinez and Private Willie Jackson, quietly told Kowalski they'd volunteer for his method if it ever got approved. It wouldn't matter. On August 29th, Colonel Ross personally reviewed the proposal and wrote across the top, "Denied. Unauthorized deviation from convoy protocol is prohibited. Any driver operating outside established convoy parameters will face court-martial." The official Army had spoken. Raymond Kowalski's ridiculous idea was dead, except someone else had been reading the reports. Lieutenant General Walter Bedell Smith, Eisenhower's chief of staff, didn't sleep much in late August 1944. The supply crisis was approaching catastrophic levels. Patton had been ordered to halt his advance, not by the Germans, but by empty fuel tanks. The British 21st Army Group was rationing ammunition. The window to exploit the German collapse was closing. Smith was the kind of officer who read everything, including after-action reports from truck companies, casualty statistics from the Red Ball Express, and a proposal from some sergeant in Pennsylvania that everyone had dismissed as insane. On August 30th, Smith walked into Colonel Ross's office unannounced. This truck driver, Kowalski, his proposal about individual dispatch. Why was it rejected? Ross was caught off guard. Sir, it violates fundamental convoy doctrine. The vehicles would be, I read the doctrine. I'm asking why we're losing a quarter of our supplies following it. Well, sir, the casualties are within expected parameters for... Smith's voice could cut steel. Expected parameters? General Patton's entire army is immobilized because we're accepting expected parameters. Get me this sergeant now. 2 hours later, Raymond Kowalski stood in a headquarters tent facing 3 full colonels and a lieutenant general. He was wearing coveralls that still smelled like diesel fuel. He hadn't shaved in 2 days, and he was pretty sure his military career was about to end. Smith didn't waste time. Sergeant, explain your method. Assume I don't know anything about trucking. Kowalski took a breath. Sir, the Germans can't attack what they can't predict. Right now, we send 20 truck convoys at scheduled intervals. The Luftwaffe knows our departure times, our routes, our speeds. They just station fighters along the route and wait. He pulled out his battered notebook. But if we load trucks as fast as they arrive at the depot, no waiting for convoy assembly, and send them out immediately at staggered intervals, the Germans never know when or where to intercept. Instead of 20 trucks bunched in a quarter mile, you've got 20 trucks spread across 60 miles of road over 3 hours. What about breakdowns? Colonel Ross interrupted. What about enemy ground forces? Same solution as now. We still run escort jeeps on patrol routes, but one broken down truck doesn't stop 19 others, and a bypassed German unit might ambush 1 truck. In a convoy, they'd ambush 20. The room fell silent. Smith looked at the numbers Kowalski had tracked. Conventional convoys, 23% losses. Independent trucks, 3% losses. The data is too small, Ross argued. Anecdotal evidence from a handful of... Then test it. Smith's decision was immediate. Sergeant Kowalski, you'll run a trial operation. 1 week, 20 trucks under your dispatch method. If losses drop below 10%, we implement it system-wide. Ross's face went red. Sir, if this fails, then I'll take responsibility. But if it works and we didn't try it, that failure is mine too. Smith looked at Kowalski. You've got your chance, Sergeant. Don't waste it. September 1st, 1944. Kowalski stood at the Allenson Supply Depot, watching 20 trucks roll in for loading. This was his test, his one chance. If it failed, men would die, and he'd spend the rest of the war in the stockade. If it succeeded, he might save thousands of lives. The traditional convoy method would work like this. All 20 trucks wait until every vehicle is loaded, usually 4 to 6 hours. Then they depart together in formation, 60 yards apart, driving at 25 mati. Travel time to forward dumps, 14 hours. Total time from arrival to delivery, roughly 20 hours. Kowalski's method was radically different. The first truck finished loading at 0600 hours. He didn't wait. You're gone. Route 7, standard speed, independent operation. The driver looked nervous but nodded and rolled out immediately. The second truck finished at 6:18. Go. Third at 6:33. Go. Instead of a convoy departing at noon, Kowalski dispatched 20 trucks between 600 and 1100 hours, 5 hours of staggered departures. They were spread across 90 miles of road at any given moment, traveling at optimal speeds for conditions rather than fixed formations. He also changed the speeds. Instead of the mandatory 25 mph convoy crawl, he told experienced drivers, "Run what's safe. You know these roads now. If you can do 40, do 40. If it's 30, it's 30. The Transportation Corps' observers were horrified. Colonel Ross's deputy kept noting violations, exceeding speed limits, no convoy organization, individual vehicle operations in a combat zone. But something remarkable happened. The trucks started arriving at forward supply dumps faster than any convoy had managed. The first vehicle reached the 3rd Army Depot at 1830 hours, 12.5 hours from departure, 90 minutes faster than the convoy average. The last truck arrived at 0445 the next morning. All 20 trucks delivered their cargo. 0 losses, 0 attacks, 1 minor breakdown. A flat tire that the driver changed himself and continued without delaying anyone else. The German Luftwaffe did spot 3 of Kowalski's trucks during the run, but intercepting a single truck required a fighter to divert from patrol, hunt down 1 target, and expend ammunition on minimal payoff. 2 pilots didn't bother. The third made one strafing pass, missed and returned to base rather than wasting fuel on pursuit. Day 2. Another 20 trucks. 9 successful deliveries, 1 accident. A driver fell asleep and crashed. But it was a single vehicle loss, not a multi-truck pileup like convoy accidents caused. Loss rate 5%. Day 3. 22 trucks, 22 deliveries, 0 losses. By day 5, even the skeptical colonels were watching the statistics with disbelief. Kowalski's ridiculous method was cutting supply losses from 23% to less than 3%, a 90% reduction, and trucks were moving cargo faster than anyone thought possible. On September 7th, General Smith issued the order. All Red Ball Express operations will immediately adopt staggered individual dispatch protocols, as developed by Technical Sergeant Raymond Kowalski. The transformation happened almost overnight. By mid-September, the entire Red Ball Express, nearly 6,000 trucks, had abandoned traditional convoy operations. Depots loaded and dispatched vehicles continuously around the clock. Trucks departed every 3 to 5 minutes instead of massing into vulnerable formations. The statistics were staggering. In the final 8 weeks of Red Ball Express operations, September through November 1944, supply losses dropped to 2.7%. Delivery speed increased by 32%. The amount of supplies reaching Patton's Third Army and other frontline units more than doubled. German after-action reports captured their frustration. A Luftwaffe squadron commander wrote in October, "Allied supply trucks now operate with no predictable pattern. Individual vehicle interdiction is ineffective use of limited air resources. Recommend focusing fighter operations on tactical ground support, rather than logistics harassment." The Americans had made truck hunting economically impossible for the overstretched Luftwaffe. For every German fighter sent to intercept scattered trucks, that was one less aircraft defending against Allied bombers or supporting ground troops. The Germans simply couldn't afford the trade-off. But the impact went beyond just statistics. The Red Ball Express, now running Kowalski's staggered dispatch method, delivered 412,193 tons of supplies in 82 days of operation. That's enough ammunition, fuel and equipment to keep 6 Allied armies advancing across France and into Germany. Patton's Third Army alone received enough fuel to drive from Normandy to the German border. Historians would later argue about whether Allied logistics or combat prowess won the war in Europe. The answer is both, but logistics made the combat possible, and Kowalski's method made the logistics sustainable. The system spread beyond the Red Ball Express. By November, trucking operations across all Allied theaters were adopting staggered dispatch. The British Eighth Army in Italy tested it and reported similar results. Even Pacific Theater logistics planners began studying the method for island-hopping operations. In late October, a German staff officer captured near Aachen was interrogated about supply operations. When asked about Allied trucking, he shook his head in frustration. "We can't target what we can't predict," he said through a translator. "Your trucks are like ghosts now, everywhere and nowhere. We stopped even trying to intercept them. It's a waste of fuel we don't have." That quote found its way to intelligence summaries and eventually to Eisenhower's desk. The Supreme Commander circled it and wrote a note to Smith. "This sergeant's method is forcing the Germans to concede the logistics battle. Recommend formal recognition." On November 18, 1944, 2 days after the Red Ball Express officially ended operations, Technical Sergeant Raymond Kowalski received the Bronze Star Medal for exceptional meritorious service in support of combat operations. The citation specifically mentioned his innovative tactical logistics, methods that significantly reduced supply, losses, and enhanced operational effectiveness. Raymond Kowalski returned to Pittsburgh in 1946. He went back to driving trucks, the same job he had before the war. No book deals, no speaking tours, just a Bronze Star in a drawer, and memories of a few weeks in France when his crazy idea actually worked. But the military didn't forget. The U.S. Army Transportation Corps formally adopted staggered dispatch protocols as official doctrine in 1947. The method became required teaching at Fort Lee, Virginia, the transportation school, where every logistics officer learned about the Pittsburgh truck driver who rewrote convoy theory. During the Korean War, the Berlin Airlift, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan, American logistics operations used variations of Kowalski's method. Modern military supply convoys no longer mass into large vulnerable formations. Instead, they operate with dispersed timing, varied routes, and unpredictable patterns. The principle has evolved with technology. Today's military trucks have GPS tracking, satellite communication, and encrypted coordination systems. But the core concept, make the enemy's interdiction efforts economically inefficient by dispersing your logistics, footprint, remains exactly what Kowalski figured out in a notebook while watching convoys burn. Civilian trucking learned from it too. The modern logistics industry's just-in-time delivery systems, staggered scheduling, and distributed warehouse networks all trace their intellectual lineage to the same insight. Bunching creates vulnerability. Spacing creates resilience. Companies like Amazon, FedEx, and UPS dispatch vehicles continuously throughout the day, rather than in scheduled waves. It's more efficient, harder to disrupt, and scales better. They probably don't know they're using a method invented by a truck driver during World War II, but they are. In 2003, the U.S. Army Transportation Museum at Fort Lee opened an exhibit about the Red Ball Express. There's a section dedicated to Raymond Kowalski. His notebook, the one where he tracked convoy losses and calculated the math, sits in a display case. Next to it is a photo of him standing by his GMC Jimmy truck, cigarette in hand, looking like exactly what he was, a working-class driver who understood his job better than the experts. The plaque reads, "Sometimes the best innovations come not from commanders or theorists, but from the people who actually do the work." Kowalski died in 1983 at age 73. His obituary in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette mentioned the Bronze Star, but didn't explain what he did to earn it. He was just a retired truck driver, a veteran, a quiet man who did his part. But in every military logistics lesson taught today, in every thesis on World War II supply operations, in every analysis of how the Allies sustained their advance across Europe, there's a footnote about the sergeant who proved that sometimes the craziest idea is the truth no one wants to hear. His method didn't just reduce supply losses by 90%. It changed how the modern world moves everything, from military gear to consumer packages. It's still in use today, still saving lives, still making the enemy's job economically impossible. All because a Pittsburgh truck driver refused to accept that convoys were the only way.